Good evening. Thank you for coming to Stewart. My name is Dr. Peter Lowe. I'm the principal here. And thank you for coming to our school. And we are very delighted to have you this evening. I know that you guys are going to be having a wonderful event led by Mrs. Young, who is our PTA president. And also a very involved parents. I see a few of our parents here. Again, thank you. And here's Mrs. Young.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ayana Young, and I am the Stewart PTA president. And this event tonight is hosted by the Stewart PTA, and we are here to welcome Dr. Linda Delgado, who is the coordinator of educational services of charter oversight for the West Contra Costa Unified School District. This event tonight, what I had in mind was to invite all of you, as well as a lot of Pinole, Elsa Brandy, Terra Hills, and Hercules parents and the community, because oftentimes we feel like we're left out of the conversation of the district, and so I want to start bridging that gap and making sure that Hercules, Pinole, Elsa Brandy, that we know we're involved and we know what's going on in the district, and we can make sure that we have the things that we need for our community and for our communities and for our students. So without further ado, we have Dr. Linda Delgado. Thank you, come on up. And I just want to say that she's going to give us a lot of information about charter schools. This is not a pro or for or against charter school event. This is just so parents, all parents, but especially Pinole, Hercules, and Elsa Brandy can start to understand the impact, if any, charter schools have on this district. All right, thank you.
And just a quick minute before Dr. Delgado begins, we are going to have her presentation, and as you think of questions, feel free to write them on the index cards, and we will take questions at the end. And so Mike Peretz, who had a lot to do with the setup today, wave your hand, Mike, he will walk around and get any, and he will give you extra cards if you have them. And then also Sandy Falk, wave your hand back at the back and back, who also helped to set up for today's meeting. We thank you from any community members who are joining us. Thank you so much. And without further ado, we want to be mindful of the time. So the custodial services, we need to be out of here at 8:30. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Linda is fine. Oh, thank you. And I haven't even said anything yet. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a very data-intensive kind of talk tonight about the charter schools that are in our district. And just to remind everybody, we're going to be looking at bar graphs a lot, and naturally the higher up a bar graph shows a particular subject or topic, the more of it there is, right? And this is all, I love bar charts because they're so communicative and so visual, so lots of that. So here we are. Let's go back just a click. This is my mission vision, okay? What I'm supposed to do as the charter oversight person, according to the professional organizations that I belong to, is I'm supposed to maintain high standards for approval and oversight, balance autonomy, school autonomy with accountability. There's a very close balance there, and uphold student and public interests, and I take that all very seriously. So far in our district, we have gone from about 3 charter schools to about 13. And as you all know, they're growing exponentially. I don't, on my computer, I do have enrollment data and statistics. And off the top of my head, I can tell you right now, there are about 6,000 kids, I believe, in charters. And I can get you that information if you're curious about it. Yes. Will do. Purpose and background information. I'm going to let you guys read that. Can everybody see that font okay? So basically, the first bullet talks about the purpose of charter schools. It is part of our law, and I'm required to uphold the law. What we often use by way of differentiating between charters and district schools is that term traditional public schools, TPS, and you're going to hear me refer to that some. TPS, schools like this, charters, schools like Aspire, Summit, and so forth. Charters are public schools. They are not allowed to select students, but the data we're going to look at tonight is going to show you some interesting facts. Around the data that you're going to look at tonight, I want you to know it is all publicly available. And if there's anybody in the room who has a hunger for that kind of thing, I love talking about it, thinking about it, and looking at it. And I'd be happy to show you how you can find absolutely everything we're going to look at. I'm particularly active on the California Department of Ed website, where you can find the most amazing things, if you're prone that way. Charters are authorized and overseen either by the district or the county. And very briefly, the way that works is somebody brings me a charter, hands it over, and we'll talk about the process a little bit more. But the district staff looks at the charter. The public is asked to comment if they have interest either for or against. We like to hear from the public at our open board meetings. So either if the district says yes to a charter, if the staff says yes, and then the board says yes to a charter, then the charter is district sponsored. If, however, the board decides that they don't want the charter, given the few reasons that they're actually allowed to deny them, then they can send it up to the county board. And the way I think about the district and the county board relationship, the district is like a city and the county is like the state. So it's, what happens is if we refuse a charter, they often take it up to the county, and the county will go through exactly the same process we do, where they have staff who look at it and then the board who votes on it. The thing that we're always looking for is basically in these gigantic documents. They're literally like a binder with a 3-inch spine. We look at governance, how the school plans to govern itself. We look at the fiscal end. Are they going to be solvent? Are they making responsible decisions? Does the budget make sense with what they say they're going to do? And we look at their educational plan. How are they going to teach kids? What are they going to teach kids? And if they have any record of past school operation, we look at that as well. We do this work called due diligence, and that's where you get to play detective and really dig into who are these people who are bringing this charter to us, and are they likely to do good work for our kids. And here we go to the process. I hit on this briefly. Again, those are the things that we're looking for. As I said, the people bring the charter to me or to the board, and I send it out to members of our staff. So we have fiscal people who do nothing but handle the money very carefully for the district. We have people who plan and implement curriculum. They're looking at this thing. Human resources often takes a look at it to make sure that the staffing makes sense and so forth. Our special ed director takes a very deep look at it to make sure that everything is as it should be in that department. And all in all, they're a team of about, it varies, anywhere from 6 to 10 of us will take a good deep look at that. And then the board actually does the same thing. I have been super impressed with our board and how deeply they're looking at these things. Okay, now we're going to change a little bit what we're talking about. I want to show you data on these influential factors, all right? So we're kind of changing from the process of starting a charter. We're going to talk about what the data is revealing about the charters that are in our district both district-sponsored and county-sponsored. I've got the data on all of them. Those are the influential factors that are going to impact how education is for a kid, basically. So if you are a child from a low-income household, it is absolutely unequivocally known that you will have greater challenges in education. If you are a child with special needs, you have, of course, some challenges in education. If you are one of those brave young people who come to our country not speaking our language, you have a dual challenge that is particularly difficult around trying to learn a language and trying to learn the content at the same time. It's a miracle to me that anybody manages it, but day after day our kids do. Let's see, if you're a foster youth or a homeless youth, there are challenges there. And I've also got data elsewhere on kids who were formerly incarcerated and have been returned to our system. Okay, so can you guys see this one okay? I think I have a tricky method of showing you what I want to show you. This is the socioeconomically disadvantaged statistics. Every one of, let's see if it'll work, yay, Richmond Charter Academy, LPS, John Henry, these are all the charter schools across that serve the students in our district. And in my presentation, I always add WCCUSD. That's our column. And so you know that our district is huge, right? 30,000 kids-ish. And we go all the way from Richmond up to Hercules. Do I have that right? That's right. Okay. Huge district, a lot of differences throughout our district, which I think makes it a really wonderful place to be. But one of the things I want to point out to you is that WCUSD, we've got 72.3% of our students are coming from households socioeconomically challenged, right? The charters, their statistics are somewhat different. In many cases, you see they're serving higher numbers of children from low-income households. However, I'll also point out that of these, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one are all in Richmond, okay? And generally, if I were to take all of those statistics and compare them with Richmond schools, it would look different. But I'm trying to paint as broad a picture as I can, okay? So, first slide. Yeah, and they're in here. It might be hard to see the data, but across the top, 92.7% at Richmond Charter Academy.
What does it mean to be socioeconomically disadvantaged?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Does anybody in here know the answer to that? Yeah, free and reduced lunch, but what's the data attached to that? Does that mean, less than X thousand a month or something? That's kind of what you're getting at, I bet, right?
The number in the household and the annual income.
Excellent. Number in the household and annual income. And I don't, beyond that, I don't know.
A family of four, less than $48,000 a year.
I am so impressed.
I work for a federally funded program.
Yay, well done. Yeah, nothing like audience participation. Thank you. Yes.
We are videotaping this broadcast. When you speak without the microphone, nobody's hearing anything.
Oh, can I?
So maybe you could repeat the question
Yes.
that they say.
The question was, when we talk about socioeconomically challenged, what exactly does that mean? And the answer from our good audience was that it depends upon the number in the household and the annual income. And you told me four-member family under
48,000.
Under 48,000. All right. Here we have the students that are in special education. This is an interesting slide, I think. In this case, WCC is right here. This is the district. And you'll see that our number of students who are in special education within the district, 12.3%. They march all the way down to here, where we've got 0.5%. Yeah, and again, there's nothing that beats a bar chart to show you critical information in a really easily digestible way. I believe, let's see, the difference between the most and the least is 11.8 percentage points between the district with its great big 12.3 and John Henry down yonder at 0.5. There is another piece to know about special education statistics, and that is that there is a measure called incidence. And incidence means how severe are the needs of the child. And you have children who are maybe need a little bit of help with pronunciation or the way that they move language around in their brains. And you also have kids who are way down here on the other end of the spectrum who need bathing and diapering and are unable to move out of a wheelchair, okay? That down on this end is called high incidence, and the children with the fewer needs over here are low incidence. Now, it's really hard to get data from charter schools on this. I have made requests, please tell us what your incidence rates are, because that's, obviously important. If you're providing speech and language services, it's far less expensive than if you have a one-to-one aid and all of the deeper requirements of the child down on this end. Generally, the accepted wisdom, which I cannot give you statistics on, is that the district is serving kids with far higher incidence. And I think that's a reasonable thing to suggest if you go out to some of our schools, like I believe Fairmont has high needs. Any other school you all can think of? We're talking intensive, kids who need bathing and so on. Yes? Terra Hills. Okay. And interestingly, in some cases, the test scores are all put together. In some cases, if a child has extreme special needs, they are not tested in the normal SBAC, great big cumulative test that we do. But in many cases, they are participating in the testing. All right, so these things all impact and influence how different schools do with test scores. Reach. Here we have the foster youth thing, and this is one of those, I have to figure out a better way to present this, I think. On the far left-hand column down by me, you've got Richmond College Prep, then Caliber, then Aspire, CPA, then WCC USD is the fourth down at 0.5. However, let's talk about the raw numbers. RCP, that's a greater percentage of their population, but in fact represents 4 children in their population that are foster youth. Caliber, 5 children who are foster youth. Aspire, 2. WCC USD, 137. So, it's a great instant visual, but remember we're looking at how many of the entire population there are. And I would, you don't need me to tell you that educating 137 is different than educating 2 or 3. Homeless youth, similar kind of situation. Manzanita had 4, but shows as 4.0% because their school is tiny. It's about 100 kids. WCC USD, over the course of the year, we educated 978 homeless youth. In the case of when the census is measured, it was just 775. And that's what's represented in the bar chart because I'm pretty conservative in the way I represent. All of the schools to the right there, those have 0. That would be Caliber, Summit TAM, Summit K2, Richmond College Prep Aspire, both Aspires. Richmond Charter Academy. This is like an eye test from this distance for me. I'm just like breaking down here. Okay, now we're going to swing over and talk about English level learners. English learner levels, that's it. So this one is a little bit tricky, and I want to provide you with a little bit of background so that when we talk about the English levels that are in the charters and the district, you understand what we're talking about. You have 5 different levels of English language learner. Whether they are from Yemen, whether they are from El Salvador, doesn't matter, they're learning English, and we give them a test once they have been identified as English language learners, and that test will tell us which level they're at right now. Super important that we know that, because when we know where they are, it helps us determine what they need, right? So we're very keen on these things. The very newest kids are usually beginners, not always, but oftentimes beginners. And they're shown at the top here. Next is early intermediate, then early advanced, then advanced. And right when they're around advanced, they often get reclassified and freed from any kind of special English language instruction. So those are super important to remember. As we're talking about this, think to yourself about the effect of testing a child who doesn't understand the language. It's going to have an impact, right? If you have Layela, who has just come in from Yemen, and she doesn't know any of our language at all, when she sits down to take that SBAC, it doesn't matter how brilliant she is. What the result is going to be is a low test score. Not her fault, not really a good measure of what she's capable of, but that's, it's what we have. So, looking at that, yeah, and of course, beginner kids usually are more expensive to educate, and because you need more resources, you need to have special language facilities support brought in for them. So, oh man, this slide did not come out well. Can you guys see that at all? Each one of these bars has different colors, all right? And you know what I can do? I will share this presentation with your principal so you guys can look at it, with appropriate colors and everything. But basically what we're seeing here is all of the schools in our district are fortunate to have fairly high numbers of English language learners. Again, we're a lucky place to be. It turns out, however, that in WCUSD, we have far higher numbers of beginning language learners. And I think the reason for that is that quite often charters are fully enrolled from day one. So if they are fully enrolled and our young friend Layala comes in from Yemen, she cannot go to a charter school, therefore she will come to a district school. And lucky for us, we'll take her no matter the time of year, no matter her English language status. So what we have in the district are far higher numbers of beginner and early intermediate. Those are the first 2 levels down here of kids acquiring English, right? So naturally that has an effect in reviewing our test scores and how things are going to shake out for us. Trying to see. This is going to circle back on us in a second because we're going to start, just to show you how this affects and kind of complicates looking at the data, the test data between the charters and the district. Keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am.
Why can the charter school not take a beginner student? Why is that? You said it.
I did, yeah. The question is, why is it that they can't take a beginning level student? It's actually probably twofold, and I'll explain. The first one again is because oftentimes when the new year starting in whatever the first day of the academic year is, the charters are fully enrolled. They're full, and you will never hear the district say we are full. Okay, we don't do full. We say Move over, you know, come on in, let's work this out. Charters don't do that. They don't do that for whatever reason, they don't do that. And so they're fully enrolled, newcomer comes in, say, in April, toward the end of the year. They cannot go to a charter school, so they go to a district school. That's one possible, and I think very reasonable interpretation for the data. Another one could be that you'll notice that a lot of the charters are college prep. And I don't know this, but I think it is entirely possible that they would, you know, be a discouraging place for a child to come in if it is truly college prep from beginning to end, because that means that you know, not only is the child trying to learn the language again, but they're trying to learn AP Physics at the same time, right? Or AP English. So that's a possibility. Yes, sir?
But if a parent wanted his daughter or his son to attend a charter and they had an opening, the charter would have a kid, correct?
Yes. The question is, if an English language learner came in and there was an opening in the charter would have to take that child, and the answer is yes. And the data shows a different story. Again, possibly because of that fully enrolled thing in the, you know, beginning of the academic year. I don't know, but that's, you know, that's what our data says, that the beginners and the early intermediates are mostly in the district. Okay, now to kind of think about some of these things, I decided, you know, all the years past, the way that I've looked at data for the charter schools is knowing that the populations are very different in charter schools and that they're able to draw from all across the district. I have just used a very, what I'll call, hand grenade approach to the data analysis, where I said, oh man, it's too complicated. I'm just going to average all the district scores. But then I started wondering, had a conversation with Alicia Bowman, who does data for our district, and she said, well, why don't you look at family groupings? You know, in our district we have a thing called family groupings. You guys are the Pinole family, right? Yeah. And you know that your elementary schools march up to the middle school, or in the case of this glorious place, you stay here for middle school, and then you go to the high school, which would be Pinole Valley, right? Okay, so in the case of Korematsu, that is in the Richmond El Cerrito family, and happens to be located just down the block from Summit K2, all right? So Summit K2, you may recall some of their earlier data. The Summit group are the only two schools that serve lower amounts of children from socioeconomically challenged houses. And I decided I was going to try and match up as much as I possibly could and look at it as closely as I possibly could. So here you have ethnicity. This is almost impossible to read, and I apologize. But basically, with this slide, you're a good man, looking at it right here where we can actually read it. Korematsu, let's see, about 29% Hispanic Latino, 2% Filipino, 30% white, 2% two or more races, African American 18%, 18% Asian. Summit K2, 21% African American, 7% they did not report, which always makes me curious, and two or more races, 10%. So basically the same demographics. Korematsu has more white kids, and Summit is a little more diverse in that respect. Both have similar similar levels of Hispanic Latino, but don't do like a lot of people do. Don't go thinking that if you're Hispanic Latino, you're also an English language learner. There are some of us who are Hispanic Latino and grew up speaking English. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now we'll look at the special populations. Remember, those are those influential facts I talked about? On the left-hand side, you have English language learners. That one is Summit K2. That's, so all the way across, I'm using this color that's kind of, what is it, mustardish? Yeah, we'll call it mustard for lack of a better word. That is the Summit K2 data. On the other side, on the right-hand side, those columns are Korematsu data. And you can see that on the here, socioeconomic levels, one is 52%, one is 51%. Basically a wash. They're serving about the same numbers of kids from straitened circumstances. Next, you have students with disabilities, 8% at Summit, 13% at Korematsu. So quite a bit more over at Korematsu. Homeless, 2% at Korematsu, 0 at Summit. English language learners, 16% at Korematsu, 14% at Summit. As you guys know, we need to dig into that piece, right? Because there's those 5 levels. If we look over here, we see that this is the Summit color. In this case, it's kind of a funny red. And then the district is represented, Korematsu is represented by something that looks green to me in this funny light. And as you can see over here for the beginners, we have 12% of beginner English language learners at Korematsu. We have 2% at Summit. So 6 times as many beginning level speakers at Korematsu. Okay, early intermediate, there are 14% early intermediate at Korematsu and 2% at Summit. So you're seeing where we're going with all of this? It lines up right at intermediate. They're again within about a point of each other, lots of intermediate level speakers. And then early intermediate, also pretty straight across, and advanced English language learners. Most of the students at Summit, the charter, are advanced. Now what does that mean for test scores? It's, you know, it's tricky to kind of ferret all this out, but we know it has an effect. It's not a thing that's debated in education circles. It's a known factor. So here we have just, you know, all of the data tossed in together. This is the SBAC test. That's the great big cumulative test that we do at the end of the year. It's a high stakes test. It's an incredibly important measure, I would argue, in how well schools are doing, all right? It's not about the kids to my professional mind, it's about how are we doing. So here we have Summit K2, ELA, 64%, pretty darn good, and math, 38%. This is all of the kids that are tested. This is the special ed kids, this is the English language learners, this is the foster, the homeless, the previously incarcerated. Although at Summit there weren't any of those, I don't think. Korematsu, we have 57 ELA and 40% math. I think in aggregate, this was about 5% percentage points different between the two. But think back for a second about what we know about the populations. Okay, what do we know about the population at Korematsu? Anybody want to throw out a thing you know about the population based on the data we just looked at? A lot more special ed. Yeah, at Korematsu.
More beginner ELs.
More beginner ELs at Korematsu. Did you have another one? Yeah, foster, formerly incarcerated. I happened to look at that data. They're there as well. Yeah, homeless, sure. So it's kind of a different population. Now, if you were me, what would you do to try and get at how to true these up, how to compare them more accurately? What would you do? You look like you were about to say something.
Well, I mean, I would match the population as much as I could.
Match the population as much as you could. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, to repeat the question or the statement, there must be more Einsteins at Korematsu. I'll second that. And yeah, there is an impact here. Now let me tell you, when I say 40%, always stop me if I'm not explaining enough. This is one of those things where I didn't. What I mean by 40% are kids who are at or above grade level. Okay, and that's what we're shooting for at the district, at or above. Know that there's 4 categories. There's far below, there's at, and there's above. Those are all the different levels that our kids will sort into. And again, you know, measuring how we do, and this is what we look at. One of the things, one of many things that we look at. So next I decided, well, what would happen if I looked at fluent and English only? When you get into the data on DataQuest, you can slice and dice it a million different ways. And the whole object of the game is to do it as fairly and transparently as you possibly can. And that's what I'm shooting for. So I thought, well, let's take out the effect of those beginners and early intermediate students. Let's try this. So I did. And you see, suddenly Summit is 69.89. Again, I took out theirs as well, because that's fair. And ours is 64.38 for ELA. For math, 42.7 for Summit. For Korematsu, 45.8. Now, what happens if we go over here and we do English only? At Summit, you've got 62.4 for English Language Arts. At Korematsu, you got 65.09. Math at Summit, 42.74. Korematsu, 49.44. You know what just happened here in aggregate? Like when you add these up, Korematsu just pulled out front by about 9 points. So it's interesting to think about. And, you know, this is the sort of data analysis we are more and more keen on in the district, and what we are doing more and more of. And oh my goodness, it can just make you crazy. I go into my office, I sit there by myself, and I crawl around on the CDE website trying to understand what's going on, what's going well, what we need to work on. That's what we're all doing. And here's a good example of what happens when you dig deeply into what's happening with the data. So I hope I didn't bore you half to death. Yes, ma'am.
So in that last slide, you said that Korematsu scored about 49 points. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean that the charter schools aren't doing any better than, or that particular charter school is not doing any better than Korematsu? And actually is 9 points behind?
That's what the data is saying, yeah. And you know where we will go from here is more of this kind of analysis. If we can get cooperation from the charters, we could probably even get a more precise analysis right now, because I have a hard time sometimes getting what I want, such as incidents, getting information on special ed incidents. You know, I'm stuck with what I have, which is what CDE has. But keep in mind, CDE is awesome. They've got fantastic stuff on there. I've got your questions. Shall I? Yeah.
Okay. And we'll still collect questions as you think of them. And I probably will have to go, I'll read the big print ones first, and then I'll get my glasses for the little print ones stuff. Okay, here's one. We know you're not from the budget department. However, what financial impact on the district budget do charter schools have?
That's a topic that's hotly debated. I'll start with that. Know that the way the funding works is for every child, that goes to a charter school, the money follows that child, okay? And in California, you know, we are horribly underfunded for education. I think in California, the amount that you get to educate a child is about $8,000 to $9,000 for a year. What is it in New Jersey, Linda? Why, it's $19,000 in New Jersey. Does that give you a sense of what we're doing here? It's all Prop 13 to blame. And, you know, we are underfunded in California. It's about $8,000 to $9,000. And if I go to a charter school, that money goes with me. Now, some argue that because the burden of educating little Linda goes with me when I go to the charter school, that there's no impact. But when you look at the data around who's at the different charter schools, you see a sort of different story, because the data is showing that as of last year, for which this is that's the data we're looking at, we have far higher numbers of more expensive kids to educate. So we also have a district that does not grow and shrink quickly and easily. It's not a school of 100 where you can hire fewer numbers, where you can do all kinds of you know, innovative things with your staffing and so forth. We don't have that luxury. We have teachers on contract. We have you know, the infrastructure at the district level. Just to give you a sense of how we're doing there, with the 5,000 to 6,000 kids that are in charter schools, you are looking at the charter department. And I don't, you know, and this is the way it is across the district. We're all working pretty hard, I'm proud to say.
I'm going to keep the money one questions somewhat together, and some of this you may have already said, but to be fair to the people that wrote their questions, sure, I will ask them, and then if you have further thoughts. Has anyone looked at the additional money required to educate the disproportionate number of special ed ELs and other special population groups at the district's traditional schools?
That's a great question, and I believe the answer would be yes. We have a whole building full of brilliant fiscal people, and that would be a question for them or for Steve Collins, who manages our special ed for the district. Suffice it to say that when you have a one-to-one aide, meaning for a child with extraordinary needs, you have an aide who is next to that child all day long, helping them with whatever they need. That's much more expensive than a child who needs speech therapy that may occur in a group of 3 other kids with a speech therapist.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, if I, as a community member, wanted to dig deep into a charter school budget and compare it to the district budget, where would I go? Where would I go? In my spreadsheet.
And I would love that if you did. Charters are public documents. And in a perfect world, we'd probably have them all on the district website, and I can work on that in my spare time. But in the meantime, quite often, charters will publish their own charter document. So if you go on their website, you should be able to find everything about their budgets. And keep in mind that charters are public schools. If you wanted to attend a charter board meeting, you certainly could. Anybody in this room who is curious about what happens at a charter school, you can attend their board meetings. However, some of the management or the CMOs, charter management organizations, some of the ones that serve our community are located in San Jose, so you'd have a bit of a travel. Sometimes they're televised, sometimes they're not. They vary a great deal in how much they will notice their meeting minutes and how detailed their meeting minutes are. If you look at the district meeting minutes, you'll see that they're very extensive. And I wish I could say the same for all the charters. At this point, they're not there. So did I answer it, or did I go on?
That was great. The more information, the better, because many of these questions and answers overlap. So you're covering a lot of really important information. In looking at budgetary projections and considering the enrollment increase due to the expanding charter schools, will there be a breaking point where base funding is no longer adequate in providing the dollars needed to sustain our district?
The worrisome answer on that is that yes, there probably is. You all may know a little bit about district history. There was a time just about a decade ago, I think, where our district was in bankruptcy and receivership, where we had somebody from an outside organization sitting and making sure that we managed our funds correctly. The district made what I think is a fairly heroic decision to not declare bankruptcy but actually pay debts off. That finally happened, I think, about 2 years ago, and right at that point we had the skyrocket in charters. I think the funding changed in California also. Local control funding formula made this district, with our high numbers of high-need kids, a more lucrative opportunity for charter management organizations to come in. And so now we have a point where, yes, the charters impact the district budget, because with 5,000 to 6,000 kids going to the charters at about, let's say conservatively, $8,000 a pop, somebody do the math, it's a gigantic number, right? And that is the amount that goes away. Now, again, we are locked into contracts with our teachers and our administrators and a few of us up at the district office. And quite often we are, the net effect of that is that the district is called upon to do more with less.
So have there been any school districts that have been bankrupted by charters?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I know that LA Unified, right down the way, they have a high percentage of charters. They entertained the option of going entirely charter. And they did that, I think, to signal to folks that there is a breaking point, and there is a point at which the district cannot afford to keep the lights on anymore and to educate all of those kids that we just looked at statistically up here. So yeah, there probably is a point. Some of us have been looking at a model that was put out by a very bright couple with some time on their hands in Massachusetts. And this model allows you to feed in the number of seats, meaning students who go to a charter school, and see the effect on the rest of the district. And the effects would include things like having to close down services, after-school services, having to lose librarians for schools. It has an effect. Having to increase class size, because there is a set amount of money and we have to make it work within that set amount of money. Knowing that the money follows the students, it can get very dicey.
Where do we find this model?
Search online for the Massachusetts charter school model, and the internet continues to amaze me. I bet a sloppy search like that would help you find it. And you can also contact me and I can hook you up with it if that doesn't work.
Great. Okay. Does the state provide more funding for minority students?
Yeah. State provides more funding for things like English language learners, students in poverty. Yeah.
So why are there so many charters in Richmond, in West Contra Costa?
That's anybody's guess. There is a very powerful lobbying organization that's probably going to be watching me on film in no time at all, and going to increase my popularity with them. And they're called the California Charter Schools Association. I'm sure they're a very well-intentioned group of people, but their goal is to increase the number of charter seats by as much as ever they can. And the assumption has been that charters will outperform the traditional public schools, but as we see from the data, it's a little more complicated than a straight across review. So, yeah.
The first part of this question, why are there so many charter schools? I think you addressed that a little bit. But how do investors make money on charter schools?
This is a little bit out of my expertise, but I'm going to tell you what I know. There is a local group called Public Core, Publicore, like public Apple Core maybe. And they have some interesting information up about investors in charter schools. I think one model is that an investor may buy a piece of property and put a building up on that piece of property that is perhaps created in the tilt-up model, a little bit less expensive to produce a building like that. They don't necessarily need to use union labor in an effort like that, and they can have a pretty sexy, good-looking building for less money than the district is able to do it. They then rent the facility to a charter school, and they are renting the facility to the charter school, but the charter school is paying with what money? Public money, our money, district money, all of those are true. It's your tax dollars, okay? So the rent is being paid with tax dollars. And in this way, I guess an investor could pocket some money, right, over the long haul, and then also they would own the building at the end of this exchange. So it's, I think the charter world is having a lot of unintended consequences that folks are thinking about, and that's good. It's good to have these good public dialogue and debates about it, I think.
I'm going to take this.
Yeah.
So that comes on the. So that comes on the tape. The Field Act, which regulates to make sure that district schools are earthquake safe, is not applied to the charter schools. At this moment, I still have quite a few questions, but I do want to point out that the West County Alliance for Public Education did bring this sheet. This is not from the district, this is ours. And it gives many, many resources that you can go find the history. It's got the Public Core website on here, which is doing a lot of things locally. It's got the national group. It's got Kids Nonprofits here, which CTA has sponsored that one. ACLU has information, and Mr. Madrano brought information in the back. California Department of Education, like Dr. Linda said, that is a gold mine for information if you want to look up test scores. So make sure, if you want to know more, there's lots of places to go to. Okay, there was one I really wanted to get to, and I think I can, rather than shuffle through, what is the district doing to improve the traditional public schools so that kids don't have to go to charter schools?
Cool. That's a great question. I think some people will shoot me for wanting to say this, but in a way, I think the charters being part of the scene has caused the district to do a lot of introspection around issues like, are we treating parents nicely when they come through the door? Some kind of obvious things. Are we being civil? Are we happy to see you? Are we treating your children well? All of those things, that's all good stuff. The district has actually been on what I would call kind of a continuous, slow but steady improvement for about a decade in most respects, keeping in mind that we did manage to pay off the district debt. We did manage to build a lot of beautiful facilities for kids, a thing that matters. We did manage also to transition to the Common Core standards, which is a very different way of teaching and being with kids, and good for your kids, I believe. So with all of that, what else have we done recently? We have invested a lot of time and brain power in better meeting the needs of our English language learners. And we have got a department now of very bright young and old folks who are working at building up our services around English language learners and making sure that kids are getting what they need. So, I think we're doing a darn good job with some very difficult situation. I mean, as you saw from the data in this district, it's not an easy place to teach, to lead, to learn, to grow. I happen to love it. Been living here for 26 years now. Wouldn't live anywhere else. But we have our challenges. And it kind of seems to me that the charters who are coming into our district are starting to realize, oh, it's not as easy as we thought it was going to be. The WCC is not a bunch of idiots. There are some real challenges here, and we need to acknowledge that they're here and move on from there.
Please describe the higher standards to which charters are accountable, who measures and reports, and what if a charter does not meet one or more of the standards?
The most important measure around charter evaluation is student learning. Okay? It is not the only measure, but it is said to be the most important measure. Remember when I started out my discussion tonight, I showed you my mission and vision, and it talked about the balance between autonomy and accountability, right? The accountability says that charters are supposed to outperform us. They're supposed to outperform the district schools. If they don't, there's not much point in their being here. Right? All it's going to do is distribute the resources that we would have for educating the kids, and not in a productive way. So they are supposed to outperform us. And depending upon how you measure it and depending upon how you look at it, I feel like we're getting better and better at doing those close, careful analyses of what they're doing and what we're doing. And unfortunately, with a charter, the only mechanism you have is we can talk about what we're seeing. We can talk about the data. That's my job. I've got a 20-some-odd page report on my computer that has this data in it that I'm hoping to God somebody will read. So, and it's my job to come out and talk about the data like I'm doing tonight. So anyhow, yeah, it's the staff and the board who have to hold the charters accountable. If they're not outperforming the district, that's what we need to do. And I'll tell you, our board has been in the very uncomfortable position of having to close a charter school that was not outperforming. And it's one of those nights where you have 400 or 500 crying people in the gym whose hearts are breaking because their school that they dearly love is having to be closed. And I think, it's a less than perfect system, but it's what we have. So when a charter school starts having some kind of issue, it is my responsibility to let them know, hey, you're coloring outside the lines here, or hey, you're not performing adequately, and this is how I know. And it is the board's position to back me up on that when the time comes. And the staff that's much higher than I am, superintendent, associate superintendent. So that's our control. It's kind of an on-off. And we try not to do any surprises with people. We try and say, hey, it looks like this is going on. Can you give me more information? And the charters, quite frankly, view that sort of input differently from one charter to the next. Some take great offense, but that's the way it is. That's our responsibility.
Are there any new charters now applying to the district, and how can we learn about them?
Rocket Ship is a charter management organization that is a great big group of charters, and they have targeted this area. They have delivered a charter, what was it? I want to say October some darn thing. At a recent board meeting, they delivered a charter. They are now undergoing the review. The review consists again of our staff looking closely through the charter for all of the things that need to be there and need to make sense. The board doing exactly the same thing with a high degree of, they're looking very closely just like we are. That charter will have a thing called a hearing where they come out and they do, this is what we've done, this is why we're good, this is why we want to be here. And they'll have 10 minutes to kind of present their case at the November 15 meeting. You are all welcome and encouraged to go to that. And if you have feelings about it, express yourself. The board loves to hear from you. Yes, ma'am.
Can you share with us the part of the application that requires signatures to be submitted with the application?
Yes, that will be online as soon as the agenda appears for the next board meeting. Everything that they delivered to me, the great big 3-inch binder, is available to you to look at. So parents sign up to kind of... Yes, it is a requirement. Charters can either submit 50% of the number of staff that they intend to employ, signatures saying, I am meaningfully interested in working at your school, or they can submit, I want to say 50% of the parents who would be enrolled for the first year. Most charters start with about 100 kids. They do a slow growth model. So if you want to start a charter school that will educate, say, 700 kids, but you're going to start with 100, that would require 50 signatures from parents. When parents sign, they are signing a thing that has a notice at the top of every single page that says, I am meaningfully interested in enrolling my child. And it's sort of a, a solemn promise that they make that I'm actually really interested in this. And the idea is to prevent folks from getting, bogus signatures, I think. Yeah, so those signatures will be available online.
In terms of rocket ships petition, I know that recently there's been a lot of negative press about the existing rocket ship school in the Bay Area. And I wanted to know how that negative press and the specifics around what's happening in the school will impact either the district's role in authorizing this charter or recommending to the board for authorization, and how would it affect board members authorizing the charter? So it doesn't have no play at all. Can you repeat your question?
Yes, I certainly will. The question is, there has been a lot of negative press about the Rocket Ship Charter Management Organization, and will that affect our review, our staff review, and will it affect the board review? And the answer is yes, but. And if you were 7th graders, I would say, no, I won't do that. Yeah, so it will affect what we look at, because our charge is to look deeply. I am supposed to Google folks. I am supposed to dig into any printed thing about them, and that's all due diligence. Are they liable to do a good job for the students in our district? So yes, it will affect. And having said that, I would say we would take the source in mind. We wouldn't necessarily take a Facebook post, for example. No offense to Facebook, but we had a great conversation about that. But we're critical viewers of information, of news and information.
I just want to know the area. You said it's going to be in this area. They're petitioning for this area.
They have said that they want to set up shop in San Pablo. So, south of here. Yeah.
How can we as citizens at WCCUSD help control the growth of charter schools?
Boy, that's a great question. The question is, how are we going to control the growth? It's not so much for me to determine, but the ways that you can have your voice heard is to quite literally have your voice heard. You know that when charters bring a petition to the district, they tend to bring a lot of children and families in matching t-shirts. So the board can take a look out and say, wow, there's 50 people over there with a purple t-shirt. That must mean they all support. And I think, that's actually what's happening. So you have an option to figure out something like that if you want to, check out some of the sources and so forth that have been offered tonight. You can be organized and you can have your voices heard by going to board meetings. And I will beg you, plead with you, do whatever it takes to get you occasionally to go to a board meeting and say, hey, The other day, my principal came up to me and said, "My kid did this really great thing at lunch. Thank you, WCC." You know, you have no idea how infrequently our board gets to hear what's going right. You know, from the crossing guard, the grandma who is opening the gate in the morning for the kids, and getting to see those kids come in all charged up about school. We love some good news, so feel free to bring that. Yes?
I'm thinking about Callaway, right near the Pablo, and I heard that about it. Do you want to have your feeling?
I was just going to introduce Genoveva, and also we're pleased to have Madeline Cronenberg from the school board here tonight. Thank you for coming.
So anyway, I'm here because I want to keep learning about the situation, and I myself am a supporter of our traditional public education because that really is about democracy. Our traditional public education has a board that we can go and hold them accountable. We have procedures. If a child needs to be expelled from the school, there's procedures, whereas charter schools do not have procedures. They can expel who they want. They also do not, in democracy, we're supposed to protect all of our students and all of our staff. Charter schools do not protect our children or staff. So I'm here because I support traditional public education, and I don't want you to say, oh, it's going to happen in San Pablo, so I'm not going to worry about it. Well, remember, tomorrow is San Pablo, tomorrow it could be, So what I'd like to ask is, if you're interested in just plain supporting traditional public education, come to the board meeting and support traditional education so that the board will see all schools support traditional education, public education.
And when is that meeting?
November 15th, yes, that's when the first phase of the presentation, so that's what we need. We need to support each other, basically. All those that support traditional public education, we need to support each other. There's 5 cities in the district, so please, I will be here to support Pinole, and I'd like Pinole to be in San Pablo to support whoever's going to be.
All of our children, the common good. Thank you. Why do charters tend to do so much teaching online? For example, Summit K2 has students on screens. I've heard it's part of the day. Do these schools have fewer teachers?
That's a great question. That is one possible outcome of using a blended learning platform. Blended learning is when there's a teacher and a computer that the kid is interacting with. If you're going to ask me my personal opinion, I think there is definitely a time and a place for blended learning, like practice. Having a kid, that to learn a thing, there's quite a bit of practice involved, right? Whether you're a 4-year-old, whether you're a 60-year-old, you need to practice something like 8 times before you have 50% mastery of that thing. Okay, so kids need to grind away at stuff a little bit, and ideally you want to keep it interesting, you want to keep it lively, but using a computer could be useful for some of that practice. What you as parents may want to think about is the amount of time that the child is interacting with the computer, and you may want to think about the other soft skills that a child either develops in a school classroom or does not. And soft skills are the things that actually are the criteria that are listed for college and career ready is a lot of, can you get along with people? Can you work in a team? Can you negotiate? So some of these things really have to happen face to face. They can't happen with just a computer. So, yeah.
Why does the district website have a link to how to start a charter school?
Because again, in my role, what I am tasked to do is uphold the law, and as part of that, I have to make it clear to people what they're required to do if they want to start a charter. Part of the reason I do that too, to tell you the truth, is self-preservation. If I have to explain to everybody that comes to visit me that they are expected not to plagiarize, to number the pages on the charter, and these are all discussions I've had with people, the more information I get up there around what is an acceptable quality of what is an acceptable standard in these things, the better off I am, and the better off they are too. They're not going to waste their time writing something that's not going to pass muster. I did hear an interesting, it was a testimony in the California Senate recently, and there were 3 or 4 experts talking about charter schools, and they brought up a really interesting statistic. They said that about 40% of any given charter can be a cut and pasted document, because there are certain things that people have to include. The assurances, that yes, we do not force teachers to work here. Certain things that the law says they have to include. So that means, 40 or 50% of any of those great big 3-inch binders is stuff that people can find online, cut and paste into place. And where the rubber really hits the road is, do they have the fiscal expertise to manage a school? Do they have a really compelling idea around how to educate kids? It's all that stuff where it gets really interesting.
Are we also studying why district families choose charters and why they stay? Is it safety? Is it atmosphere? Maybe the test scores are not the draw. Maybe it's a learning opportunity for the district.
It's a great question, and the answer to it is kind of, all right? When part of my responsibility is to go out and visit each school each year, and I tend to go more often than that, but I'm required to do one big hairy visit. And during the big hairy visit, one of the things that I do is I ask them to gather me a group of parents, and I interview the parents, kind of like a focus group. And then I have a group of students who I interview, a group of teachers who I interview, the school leader, and ideally the board members should turn up for these things. It's kind of important. So in talking to parents, the thing that I often hear is that parents want to make sure their kids are safe. Is there anybody in this room who doesn't want to make sure their kids are safe? No, I didn't think so. I think, for parents, there is the perception that charters are safer. That might be a thing that could be explored by looking at discipline data, and actually I cracked that open for the first time today. Started looking at suspensions, expulsions, the kind of offenses that get kids suspended and expelled, because that gives you a little bit of a feeling of what's happening on a campus. And I think that we are probably very much united, we educator people, around the idea that we want your kids to be safe. We want your kids to be happy. We want your kids to be engaged. We want them to love what they do, which is come to school. That's what we really want.
If a petition is determined not to meet goals, do you want the petition declined to go to the county or stay locally with the school board to approve or deny?
That's a good question. Remember I told you that if we deny them at the district level, they go to the county. The county is possibly predisposed toward accepting petitions, all right? Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that, but I did. So they seem to be predisposed toward accepting petitions. And what that means is if a school is granted by the county, we have less oversight opportunities, and that's a problem. So it's always a balancing act, how likely is this petition to work? I don't know, it's a balancing act. So far, I think we've got now 4 schools at the county. That would be Invictus, Making Waves, Caliber, and who am I forgetting? Summit, thank you, one of the summits, and one of the summits is still here. The one that we looked at tonight, though, that happens to be a county school. The data that we looked at tonight is a county-sponsored school. So, yeah.
Okay, Can we compare Livonia Dijon to the other charter middle schools like we did with Summit and Fort Moxie?
I'm so glad you asked. I was just, I have started looking at Dijon, and the first thing I always do is I look at the special population numbers. And I was stunned to see the level of need at Livonia Dijon, okay? You talk about the socioeconomic needs. I think it's 95% of their students are living in poverty households. An astronomical number of children receiving special education services, a lot of foster youth, a lot of homeless youth. It's a place where there are a great deal of challenges. And, I was serving as a writer coach for a time just because I missed my fix of kids, so I'd sneak off during my lunch hour and go tutor kids at Livonia. And what I saw there are a bunch of great kids. They're a bunch of great, spunky, interesting kids. And, we have huge needs there. So, yeah, and yes, I will do the deep data dig on that.
Since district authorizes charters, does the district staff have the right to make unannounced inspections?
Short answer is yes, we are. We are, some charter management organizations write into their charter that, visitors have to blah, 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 but I'm not a visitor. I'm a staff person. So technically I can go in and say, hi, I'm here, just wanted to say hi. And most of our charters feel fine about that. They're in there doing their best job possible, and what do any of us have to hide? It's like, it's a public school. Technically anybody can walk in there, announced or unannounced.
Charter schools are by lottery picked for enrollment versus public schools accept any children who are resident and transfer. If there's more charter schools open, more parents try to put their children to charter schools. Would it be more of a disadvantage to public schools and put children who go to public school on risk, I guess, and such as less resource and budget cut? So just...
I think so. One of the issues with the kids in the charter schools so far, according to the data that we looked at tonight, not as high of numbers as special ed, not as high of numbers as, what are some of the other things? Foster, beginning English language learners. Now, in a perfect world, education research talks a lot about, in the old days we used to have this thing called tracking, where if little Linda here was not a good reader, she was over here in the blue group and maybe in a different classroom. And little Cindy was over here, she's really bright, she's in a different classroom. And what researchers have come to find over time is that actually maybe little Linda has got some mechanical skill or skill in math or skill in the imagination, and maybe Cindy, memorizes things really well, but she's got none of that other stuff. If Cindy and I are together, we tend to do each other good. A little bit like the democratic idea, right? So the idea is that the more kids, the more variety of kids, both intellectually and in every single respect you can think of, the more we are in a place all together, the better our democracy is and the better actually our learning is. And I'm an 8-year classroom teacher. I saw it with my own eyes. The kid who may have had a hard time reading was brilliant at reading the emotions of, his or her fellow students. Everybody's got something special in them, everybody. So if we remove, all of the Cindys, you're going to have a classroom that's a little bit lopsided. And I, for one, am in favor of a mixed classroom and what we call heterogeneous. And the research is with me on that. It's better for all of us if we're in there together.
Okay, we just have a couple just to end. And if I didn't get to your question as we exit the building so they can close it down, we could talk on our way out to our cars. Is
Sure.
that okay?
Yeah.
Sure. And before we end, I'd really like to thank Don Gosney for filming this tonight. Thank you so much. Yes. And this one sounds like a long question, but if you could answer it quickly, and then we'll just have one final one. Within our district, do charters offer health centers, athletics, special education for the severely handicapped, deaf, blind, academics, and advanced placements? Do you have a short answer for that?
With some of that, yes. With some of that, no. I think the charters have found that in this area, we like our sports. Our boys and girls need sports, so they are starting to arrange independent leagues and so forth. So far, Advantage District, we have much more of that kind of thing. Severely handicapped, the incidence thing that we talked about earlier. I know of one child in one charter school who's deaf. I don't know every single child in every charter school. Wish I did. But so generally speaking, incidence is much, much higher in district schools. Advanced placement, better y'all watch that, all right? Because in some schools, advanced placement exists. In other schools, it does not. And the way that this college thing works is your kid needs some advanced placement, all right? They need a class or two in whatever they are passionate and care about in order to have access to a really top-notch school. So that's a really good question if you were to go to a charter school to ask that sort of thing. In some cases, they are trying to, it's tricky to staff, so that's why we have large comprehensive high schools. With some of the smaller charter schools, they have trouble staffing very many choices or choices at all. In some cases, they try and use technology to bridge that gap.
And the last one. Why should I be concerned about charter schools?
Well, what do you guys think? Democracy? Stability of the district, financial impact. So, what I would like to do is give you the information and trust you to make good decisions, because I do believe we tend to do that, we people, with a few notable exceptions in the White House. Sorry.
I'm the one who asked that question, and I want to be crystal clear.
Yes.
Okay. So, is the school district feeling threatened by the charter schools? Is that what this is all about?
Question is the school district feeling threatened by charter schools? The school district is feeling aware because, we need to keep the lights on and so forth. But we are trying to engage with this in a fair, appropriate, hopefully beneficial way, all right? And some of the ways that we do that is we go out and we look for best practices that are happening in charters, because in some cases there are some cool things happening. And our job, the whole charter school law says, you go out and copy those things, go out and steal them, steal those good ideas, bring them back home. So like with Leadership Public Schools, they've been in the district for many, many years. They have a rockin' English language arts and the data to back that rockin' plan. So, we've gone out there, we've looked at what they're doing, we've thought about what are the critical elements and how can we bring them into the district. Some of our district teachers have been excited to say, well, that's cool, and we want to share what we're doing too. We happen to have this great English language arts thing that we've developed, our team of educators, and, let's all get together and discuss it. And I think that would be a really good idea. Frankly, we are strapped on resources. Again, party of one, charter evaluator, Linda Delgado, I'm it. So, we're figuring out what are they doing well. There's one of these charters that's got really strong math results in elementary, and you bet I'm out there looking at what they're doing and coming back and talking to my colleagues about what's going well out there. And that's, again, that's one positive, maybe silver lining. the folks who are involved in the district in supporting the charters, that would be one thing that they could do that would really be helpful, you know, help us to organize these things. Underwrite paying for our teachers to come out and visit a charter school. That would be super helpful to the people who are so inclined. Sir.
I've come with the hook because it's 8:30. I see that it's nice and light out there on the porch. You heard it from the expert from the school district. Please remember, particularly the person who asked the last question, this was not a district-sponsored evening. This is being brought to you by the Alliance for Public Education, sponsored by the PTA. And we are parents and grandparents who are concerned about the impact of the charter school. But we had this wonderful, neutral presentation. The facts have been presented. You can draw your own conclusions. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming. I just want to say this last thing again because I'm glad you asked that. Again, we are way over here, you know, on this side of the district, and when I go down to a lot of meetings, and there are not a lot of people from our side of the district down there to hear what's going on. So I want to start bringing information to Panola and Hercules and El Serrano so that we know what's going on. But that's why you asked that question. What's going on with the charts? Because we don't hear a lot of information. So I'm going to help to start making that change, and we're going to start getting information down here in Panola and Hercules and El Serrano.